about my experience, and I'll try to be as quick as possible. Like Lisa said, I am a school teacher, and I do coach the robotics team here. I'm a mom. I was a daughter, I guess still a daughter, but COVID did take my mother's life in April, on April 14th. And she was here with me in my house, and she was fine. She had no symptoms. She had no temperature. Um, she just turned 80 years old. We were watching Mary Poppins, holding hands on my sofa, and she was telling me how handsome she thought Dick Van Dyke was with his sparkly blue eyes. And I was teasing her and telling her, Mom, give the men a rest. You're 80 years old. And she said, well, I'm old, but I'm not dead. And we started laughing, and we had a little snack. And that very same evening, the 911 came and took her to St. Mary's Hospital, and within 12 hours she was gone. And within a very short period of time, I became diagnosed positive with COVID. I have 2 young adult sons that live in my home with me, and eventually they became COVID positive.
Oops.
And it seemed like whoever was the oldest had the hardest way to go. My mom just turned 80. She passed away. I just turned 59, and I was in a fight for my life. And my 28-year-old son had it a little bit respiratory. He struggled a little bit. He was off work about 4.5 weeks. And then my 19-year-old son rebounded the best, and he was back on his online classes just under 4 weeks. So the COVID is something that really takes a lot of time to recover. Even if you have a mild case of it, it's not like a cold. You hear this all the time. Oh, it's just like a flu. Some people just have it, and it's just like a flu. And it's really not. It does not behave like a flu in your body, and it does not behave like a flu in your recovery. When I was hospitalized at one point, the doctor, my lungs were struggling, my kidneys were shutting down, my liver was blowing enzymes. They were putting heparin shots in my stomach 3 times a day because they were concerned about blood clots. And I asked the doctor, I said, what is going on? I couldn't eat. If I took a sip of water, I would fill my mouth with water and attempt to swallow, and it would just come right back into my mouth. And it wasn't a regurgitation or anything like that. It was just, it could not go down. It was as if my stomach closed. And at that point, I asked the doctor, I said, what is going on with my body? And he said, I'm gonna tell you in a really quick way, a way that you can understand quickly, that he said, have you ever had a cat? And I said, yeah, I've had 2 cats. And he said, well, there's such a thing as a sneaky cat. And he said, like, you're trying to catch this cat and it goes behind the TV. You have it trapped there. It's not going anywhere else. You zoom in on trying to catch that cat. He says, and then suddenly you're jumping to catch this cat, and you look across the room and the cat's watching you try to catch him there. And he said, that's what COVID, how it behaves. It's a very sneaky cat, and it jumps from one place of trouble to another place of trouble, to another place of trouble till these things begin to compound each other, and then your life is, becoming at risk. And he wanted to put a respirator on me, and he said it would just be for one day, and it would be, he'd put me in a coma, a light coma. I wouldn't have to be aware of it at all. And I really didn't want to do that. I told him, I said, I really don't want to do that. As long as I can talk to you, is there anything else, that I can do? And he said, well, maybe, he said, when we have younger patients, we have them do proning exercises. And he says, but nah, you're a little older, and I don't know if you're going to be able to do it. And I said, hey, I'm a middle school teacher. I chase robots around, and I'm Italian, so I can do this. I said, just tell me what I need to do. And so he showed me these various exercises. A therapist came in, and I had to get up on my haunches and kind of tilt my torso forward. And then I had to lay with my torso completely down while I was on my knees with my hands over my head, stay in that position. And then I had to be up on all fours. And then he wanted me to walk. And then he wanted me to lay flat on my stomach on the bed. And each of these things, I was supposed to stay in this position about an hour. And he said, on occasion, you can take a break. You can, maybe sit up for a minute and then get right back to it. And it was hard. It was really, really hard. But we were able to, jazz with the telemetry of how my body was functioning enough to get that oxygen saturation back up. I could not stay in the 90s. I kept falling into the 80s. And so they used this process of proning. And, with that, I was able to find some success and be able to then come home. And I was telling Lisa, I said, I think probably the most, I wanted to tell you what happened to me, but you really don't need to hear all that because you hear these things, all the time on the television and different things happening. But I wanted you to know what happened to me was that I came home, after about 12 days in the hospital, and I was sick for a total of like 56 days. And I think the most important thing that I would want people like you to know is that you do not recover from this like a cold or a flu. And I told Lisa I'm going to talk about going back to school as a teacher, because this is a real concern for me with all of my colleagues coming into the schools, all of the children coming into the schools. My concern is not with people getting sick, because people are going to get sick. We're in a pandemic. And my concern is not really about people dying, because my mother died. I mean, people are going to die. We're in a pandemic. But the greatest concern is that old adage, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And I think sometimes that we really need to think deeply about people staying safe before we, rush this whole process and possibly just have a whole lot of people, sick, because it is very, very difficult for people to recover from this COVID-19. Just the other night, here I am. I was diagnosed on April 17th, May, June, July. It's been over 4 months. And just on Friday, I was sleeping I lost my breath. I woke up. I was able to call my son enough that, you know, he got me and got the oxygen on. But, you know, my pulse oximeter registered at 91%. You know, had I been alone, had I not woken up, you know, I mean, anything, when they say people just die, I think it's really related to how the oxygen is working. And one more thing for people that are working in therapy and working with people coming back from this disease, another thing that was interesting when that happened was that here I am 4 months post being infected, and that night that I lost my breath, my son put the oxygen on me and I sat in the recliner and I fell asleep. And I slept for several hours, maybe 6 hours. I was on oxygen, full blast the whole time. And by that time, it was about maybe 4 a.m. And I took the oxygen off and got up. And I realized that I had no pain in my body. I had been struggling with pain, just systemic muscle pain for months, for the last 2 months, since I was supposed to be better. I still had this pain and I couldn't get rid of it. I tried Tylenol, I tried ibuprofen. I went to the chiropractor and said, you know, my whole skeletal system hurts, you know, and he attempted to adjust me and he said, your body is incredibly tight. And, you know, he suggested a massage there with a therapist and maybe some Epsom salt baths. So I had the massage with the therapist, and the therapist said, I don't know what's going on in your body, but your muscles are super, super tight. And she said, I don't know if you're dehydrated. And she said, before you come back, I made another appointment to go back next week. But she said, before you come back, I want you to drink at least 50 ounces of water a day. And we'll see if it's a dehydration issue or why your muscles are so incredibly tight. And after I had that oxygen for 6 hours, I got up for the first time, first of all, and didn't feel like I was 95 years old. And secondly, I was able to move with, you know, more freedom. And I stopped myself in my tracks and said, oh my God, I'm not hurting. And I'm going to bring this information to my pulmonologist, who I'm going to see in August. And then I began Googling it, like, what does oxygen have to do with body aches, you know? And there was just like a ton of articles on, you know, how oxygen, you know, the oxygen is carried, you know, by the blood and all this. And I don't know why I didn't think of that. I don't know why it never dawned on me that, I guess I was thinking I had this illness and then maybe I'm not as old, not as young as I used to be, getting a little older, you know, and maybe the aches and pains come with it. And so you'd self-talk yourself into accepting that, you know, just 2 months ago, I worked, you know, 14 hours a day, teaching school all day, coaching at the robotics field, taking care of my aging mother. And now I, you know, can't, you know, make it through the day without having to lay down. So I guess that's my story. I can answer any questions anyone has.
I'm going to let you guys jump in a minute, but there's a couple of things. SALINA, I'm going to ask you some questions that we had talked about before.
Okay.
So we're back when my aunt Connie was with SALINA. Aunt Connie was in the nursing home or the skilled facility, and you went to take her out. Now the protocol was to take temperature, and they did. And what happened there, SALINA?
Well, I thought my mom was depressed because she was quarantined for 34 days. And, you know, she's 79 years old. And she had her birthday. She was in there. I brought her cannoli from Italian American Livonia Bakery so that she would have a cannoli on her birthday. And you know, she ate it. We ate it at the window of her apartment. Thank God she was on a first floor. And I went there every day. I saw her every single day of 34 days. I stood outside, raining with an umbrella, whatever, to see her. And by the last 2 days, my mom's birthday's on the 7th of April. My birthday was on the 12th. From the 7th, she was eating that cannoli and we were laughing and I sang her happy birthday. She told me I was a bad singer. And then by April 12th, which was my birthday, I went there and I told her, you know, that it was my birthday, and she wouldn't get out of the chair to come to the window. She said, I don't want to go. I don't want to come to the window anymore. I'm tired of this window, you know. She said, go home, be with your kids. And I came home and I called my brother immediately and said, my mom, you know, in 58 years has never told me to go home. Never told me to go home. Said something is wrong with mom, that I think she's depressed. And so I went and got my medical power of attorney to break the governor's quarantine. And if she passed a physical examination that she didn't have COVID symptoms, that I could take her. And so I went there and she was walking, she was talking, she didn't have a fever, she had no complaints of anything. And so they took her temperature and they let me take her home. And that's how we all got it.
And that's what's so amazing, because all the therapists, most of us here, we've been told we should be taking temperature, but I'm just letting it be kind of a alert. Temperature alone is not an indicator that someone does or does not have COVID, because your mother had none. Aunt Connie had no fever, and yet she passed within 24 hours.
It was within 24 hours of having her temperature taken. She died before 24 hours.
It's so, and that filters over. I see where your concern is, talking about possible school reopenings. We're trying to get better methods and measures to make it safer.
Yeah.
But that temperature alone is not it. It's not the only thing. And now when it comes to you, Selena, there's that part you were telling me. Okay, so Aunt Connie passed away. You weren't able to be at the funeral.
Go on.
No.
No, you couldn't be at the funeral because
There was no funeral.
Yeah.
When I went to the hospital, they told me that my mother would be taken directly from the morgue to the cemetery. They were going to put her in a plastic bag, seal it. No one wanted to embalm her. No one wanted to dress her. There was no viewing. There was nothing. My mother was put in her casket, not embalmed, sealed, put in a cement box, and put in the ground. And we couldn't even get flowers for her. My brother went to Kroger and bought 4 dozen roses and took all the petals off of them and threw the rose petals on my mom's grave, because that's all we had. There wasn't a florist open at that time. If you guys remember that far back, there was nothing. Everything was shut down.
It was very much like New York. That's what was going on in New York was going on here. And then it was only, a couple of days. I'm trying to remember if it was a couple of days or a week after the funeral was when Mario told you to go to the hospital.
Well, how I wound up in the hospital was that I was talking with my doctor on a telemed, and it had already been 10 days because I got sick on the 17th. I went to the hospital on the 25th of April, and so I think it had already been several days, and I had completed a RX for antibiotics, for steroids, for I had inhalers, 2 or 3 inhalers that I was using, and I was talking to my doctor on a telemed, and she said, "I think I heard you wheeze," and I said, "No, I didn't wheeze." And then the doctor says, "I really think I heard you wheeze." I said, "Doctor, I'm here, you're there. I didn't wheeze." And she goes, "Well, I want you to have a chest x-ray anyway." And I said, "You're going to make me go over to the hospital and get a chest x-ray because you thought you heard me wheeze and I'm telling you I didn't?" And she said, "Yeah, I want you to take a chest x-ray." So when I went over to the hospital to get the chest x-ray, I wasn't going to be admitted in the hospital. I was just going there to get a chest x-ray. But by the time I got to the hospital, and I drove myself because I didn't think I was that sick. I thought I was one of those people that they said, "Oh, well, you've got COVID, go home, self-isolate, self-quarantine, isolate yourself from other people." And we weren't even wearing masks that early. The general population wasn't wearing masks. And so when I got to the hospital, I got in the wrong lane of the parking lot. So I was going for COVID testing again. So I had to kind of like baja over a curb to get to the other side. And and the nurse was there. So I rolled down my window and I said, "I'm sorry, I got in the wrong line, but," I said, "I'm COVID-19 positive, just so you know." And she was just like staring at my face. And I thought, is something wrong with me? That she's just looking at me. And she said, "Ma'am, can you put your car in park?" And I said, "Okay." And I get out, and she's talking in this microphone on her wrist. She's saying something. And she said, "Ma'am, your lips are blue." And I said, "No, they're not blue. I'm Italian. I got bad coloring, you know." And I said, "I came here to get a chest x-ray. And here come these 2 nurses are flying out of the hospital. They got a wheelchair. And I'm thinking, man, somebody's really sick. They're running to go get this person. And it was
Yep.
me. They were coming to get me. And they put me into the hospital, and they had me on a watch for 1 hour that they thought I was going to have a cardiac arrest. My heart was beating 200 beats a minute.
Oh.
And they could not measure my oxygen at all. It just kept fluctuating all over the place. And, the doctor, said she's going to have a coronary, bring all the machines in, let's get set up. It's going to happen. We're just going to wait for it. And after an hour, he says, I don't know how it happened. He said, "But you didn't have a heart attack." And
You were even in the room when they carted you in with your lips blue, you were trying to tell them you wanted to go to the better hospital.
oh yeah, that was another thing I told the doctor. Not that I wanted to go to the better hospital. I wanted to go to the hospital closer to my brother. And because my brother lives maybe an hour from here, he wanted me to go to a hospital maybe 30 minutes from my house so I guess he could visit me, but he can't visit me with COVID anyway. Your thinking's all mixed up when you don't know what you're doing because this is all upside down anyway. But I was telling the doctor, I said, "I didn't come here to get admitted to this hospital. I came here to just get this chest x-ray, but my brother wants me to go to Beaumont." So, I said, "I don't know what's going on." And he grabbed me by my head because I was on the gurney. He grabbed me by the head and he looked right at me. And he says, "Ma'am, you're not going to make it to Beaumont." I said, "Now I want you to stop talking and lay still because we got a critical situation here." And it was like that that checked my mind. And I realized I've got to just accept that, this is going way south now. And I just tried to sing every hymn in the church hymn book, like from the beginning, all the pages of all the books. I tried to do them in order. I think I messed them all up, but I kept just singing in my head till he came to me after 55 minutes because I could see the camera there, or see the clock there. And he said, I think you're going to be okay. I think you're going to be okay. We've gotten your vitals settled down, and we can see where you're at, but we're going to admit you. You're going to be admitted in the hospital now."
And there you stayed. How many days was it,
12
Selena?
days.
It was 12 days. And you were really, even though you were kind of out of the woods, right on the brink of death, literally, when they brought you in there, you had your touch and go moments through that whole thing.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't know if you feel comfortable to share, but I know when you told me you saw Grandpa.
Well, yeah, people will say that you have hallucinations, and, you know, I know that it seemed very real to me that, I one on my worstest, I'm an English teacher, worstest, on my worst night, I had 4 really bad days in those 12 days, 4 really dark days that, we're talking a respirator, and, I'm not getting better, I'm not getting enough air, there's a lot of concern. And on the on my very worst day that night, I did see um, people in my room. I saw a man that looked like my grandfather. I saw 2 women that looked like my grandmother, and an older woman that used to attend church when I was young, and a baby. There was a baby that was laying at the foot of my bed, and it was there all night long. And it brought me such great comfort, more than even the adult people that I thought I saw in the room. But this baby, I could feel the warmth of this baby on my leg. And by morning, everyone, all those people were gone, but the baby was there till the sun rose. The sun was coming up, and I remembered looking at that baby, and then I must have dozed off. And then when I woke up, the sun was up and the baby was gone. But I had those like people keeping me company that night. And it was right after that night that I kind of turned the corner and realized I was going to live, you know, at least I wasn't going to die there.
I thought it was interesting too when you were describing our grandfather. Our grandfather was a rather tall man, but in this vision like state, she was seeing him as a young man, and every time the doctor would walk in, he would go over and look at the doctor's notes to see what was happening. He never sat down. He always was watching over everything, the pulse oximeters, the diagnostic equipment, over everything until the morning when you made that turnaround. And I thought that was just amazing. And I thought too, the baby representing life, that you were going to live. You were going to live through this, a new life. And hopefully too, maybe people, Selena, that hear your story will live, or they'll understand more about this disease, this condition going around, and want to live and know that they can. So you finally did come out. Now we know you're going through these recovery phases. It's weeks later, and this is what I wanted therapists to know, because they're calling and wanting to know, can we do lymphatic drainage? And can we do this and can we do that? But there are some things your doctor told you you're at risk for right now. You're not 100% yet. You're getting there. What things are they concerned about? I know one is blood clots and the other is low oxygen levels. What else did they tell you, Selena?
Well, I think the oxygen level is key to so many different things. You have body pain, you have headaches, you have eye pain, you have those kinds of things all can kind of be traced back to just not having enough oxygen in your system. It's not that you can't breathe. It's like, are you short of breath? No. Are you not, are you laboring to breathe? No. but you do the pulse oximeter and you're at, 94% saturation rate, your body is laboring to circulate your blood that doesn't have enough oxygen to feed your muscles and feed your blood vessels. And your body's, it's not in like any great trauma, but it's struggling to work. And I think that we're not recognizing that enough. And that's where, these people are becoming amputees, and there are, secondary things taking place, heart attacks and different things. And I think that that's where we have to raise our knowledge on, just how destructive and long lasting the ramifications of this virus can be.
Lena, let me ask you, when you went for your massage, you said like a week or two ago, did they use a pulse ox, or did they use that on you before you had your treatment?
No,
Okay, so
I didn't know. We didn't know to. That's what's happening. Everything is, we didn't know to. I didn't know to go. I I don't want to get political here because I'm not a political person, but
right.
I will, mention President Trump in the sense that, if he could have just said when this came to this, or even Dr. Fauci or whoever's the big wig in charge, when they, give all these families a stipend of money or whatever, or however they would organize it, give every family a pulse oximeter and have a public service announcement on the television that when you get COVID, check your oxygen every 3 hours. I probably was suffocating inside. By the time I went to the hospital, my oxygen was bottomed out, and I didn't know anything about it. I mean, I wasn't struggling breathing. My breathing was probably shallow. But if I would have had that piece of machine, I'll tell you, every friend that I know, I tell them, if they're on Amazon, $39, buy a pulse oximeter. If you have to spend your last dollar on it, buy a pulse oximeter, because when you get this, it's the only thing that's going to save you, is the knowledge that your oxygen is not where it needs to be feeding the body. Because I didn't know.
You
I
know,
didn't know.
I'm so glad you're saying it and that we're emphasizing it, because this particular respiratory attacking illness, it's like you're an airplane, and when you start losing oxygen, it's like losing altitude, but it's so gradual for some that by the time you actually feel something, it's already too late. That's why
Yes.
people were, like you were saying, you weren't feeling anything, but had you had that medical device, you would have known just by the numbers that you were kind of flying too low with your O2. And
Well, it wouldn't have it wouldn't have been something that I had to cognate or figure out, like, well, what am I feeling? How do I feel? Because I'm someone that, I keep going all the time. It's just always been that way for me. If you don't feel good, you still keep going. I'm a single mom of 3 kids, by myself, and I had my mom with dementia and stuff, and so I had to always be doing stuff. So to sit and think, how am I feeling? How am I breathing? With this COVID thing. But even then, it would not have been obvious to me. But if I saw that little light up and say, you're in the danger zone with your oxygen, then that would have been a reason for me. I'm telling you, if there's a few ifs here that are really critical, that the fact that I'm even talking to all you folks, and that is, if I hadn't had that telemed meeting that day with my doctor, if she had not requested for me to go to the emergency room and go to the plywood shed outside the hospital for the x-ray for COVID-19 patients. If my lips were not blue when that girl looked at me, because she's the one that pulled me into the hospital, I would have come home and gone to bed and probably died in my bed. Just not knowing.
Not knowing.
These people that they say they find people dead, they really do. They really, really do. And I think that it's important that you tell all of your patients, if there's one golden jewel we can take away from this discussion tonight, is to have a pulse oximeter in your home, and whoever gets sick, check them every 3 hours. And when that saturation percentage begins to go down, you know, anything under 96, 95, they got to go to the hospital.
And that would even, besides even the COVID, anybody's who O2 level dropping like that, you would want to get them to a hospital. In fact, Salina, we have here, his name is John Romano. He's our distant cousin, Italian brother down there in Fort Lauderdale. He's from Pennsylvania. Love John, but he's been working with personal protective equipment. His group there are one of the suppliers for the United States. John, do you want to share with Salina a little bit about what you've been seeing about this personal, because we said the same thing. If you're going to give the country money, why not give them a pulse ox and some mask? I mean, that would make sense to me. But John, go ahead, jump in here.
Yeah, it definitely would make sense. We actually are right in the middle of trying to negotiate something with Homeland Security as far as gloves and pulse oximeters. We actually had just a huge shipment of pulse oximeters come in, I think it was last week, beginning of last week. I guess it was Monday or Tuesday. So definitely important. I mean, there was an issue early on, and it's still kind of an issue where with the masks and stuff like that, it wasn't that we didn't have them. In the beginning of the whole COVID outbreak, basically all the factories except for the factories in China shut down. So the ones that were in Indonesia and the ones that were in Turkey, they all shut down so that their employees didn't catch anything. China was the only one that was open. When we were first starting to deal with some of these government contracts, they came back and said that they weren't allowed to order because if they ordered stuff from China, that would interfere with Trump's trade war with China. So all the products were available. He just was not allowing them to come into the country.
And then we
So many political things. I know that.
I know, and
not that I want to make it political, but there are political things going on.
Exactly.
So just so you know too, Salina, when you were in the hospital going through this, I was calling John and I called our governor and some of the Congress people in Michigan because I knew that the doctors and the nurses, they didn't have enough personal protective equipment. And I was trying to connect them with John.
And that was the other thing. You know, Elisa had sent me all the people that were in charge, and I contacted all of them. And out of all the different districts, I think I only got 2 or 3 people that were in charge of districts that called me up. And like the one guy was interested in getting the disposable isolation gowns. And I'm like, well, how many do you need? He goes, well, I need over 40,000, but there's a problem. And I said, what's that? And he goes, well, they haven't raised our budget to get them, so we only have $6,000 to spend, which wouldn't have even placed a basic order. So you have all these people that need all this equipment, and yet their own state governments weren't increasing the amount that they could spend so that they could get what they needed.
So that's why in overcrowded hospitals where they were struggling to try to help the patients, some of the actual healthcare givers were getting, you know, if you heard the stories, they were wearing the same gloves for 2 or 3 days or the same mask, and They didn't have the tools necessary, and hopefully now some of that's been making some breakthroughs. But now as we go back to work, I know that you guys are asking, what kind of tools should we have? I know we're all looking at having gloves, we're looking at masks, having hand sanitizer, taking your temperatures, but I'm thinking the pulse oximeter or the pulse meter. We're also going to have on next week, like I said, Dr. Scott, who is an LMT and a doctor from Florida. He's going to join us on this stuff to help us to really be aware what we still need to, we can't let our guard down because this isn't over. And even for Salina, who's greatly been brought back to share her story, she's still going to go through this for the next few months. So Salina's my cousin. Can I work on her yet? Can I not work on her? She still has a risk of blood clots for now. We would need to know about her lab work. We would need to get authorization from her doctor, confirming, because that was one thing we didn't have. I was interested to see, Salina, what your lymphocytes look like just when you went into the hospital and what your lymphocyte level is right now. To understand how strong, because you can hear she's saying, she's been an active, vivacious, I know my cousin, she'll be active until she's 99 years old and running circles around all of us. So to see her having to slow down tells me she's really worn down. Her immune system is needing some natural help to get restoration. So Salina, what are they telling you to do now? Are you on medication? What are they giving you?
Well, I wanted to this is kind of in medically information, but also there's some funny parts to it too. That another thing that happened to me once I came home from the hospital, I've been on oxygen since April 25th, and I'm still on oxygen. And so when I came home, they gave me a prescription for vitamin C, for zinc, for asked me to, I think, elderberry, and I can't remember them all right now, but there's a probiotic, elderberry, zinc, vitamin C, vitamin D. Those were the kind of things they were giving. You know, it wasn't, I didn't come home with pain pills or, codeine or any, highly prescription kind of medicine. It was like all of these natural concoctions to try to raise my immunity, because they said, keep that mask on, because even though you've had COVID, now you're going to catch everything else, because COVID, knocked the crap out of your immunity system. But what happened with me was that I was wearing the oxygen around my neck, and it had like a little thing that would slide up and down, and it had a little edge on it that was kind of bothering me a little bit. But I thought, well, just my fat's getting stuck in there or whatever. And so I just kind of would just keep putting it on and not worry about it. And I put a little Vaseline there because it was kind of irritated or whatever. And then the next morning, after it kind of felt more irritated, it was happening for like a couple days. Then I woke up the next morning and I had a baseball on my throat, and it was just hanging there. And here I am now. I just got out of the hospital like 5 days before, and now I got to go back to the hospital. So I called my dermatologist and I said, Doctor, I just spent 12 days in the hospital. So will you look at this and see, what's going on with me? And he said, sure, and he said, could you take your temperature for me just so I know where you're at with that, And I said, because, I don't have COVID anymore. I tested that it's not active. And then he said, could you take your temperature for me? And my temperature was 102.7. And he said, I want you to go straight to the hospital, because he goes, do you know what sepsis is? And he said, that will kill you, so you need to go back. He said, I'm going to call you in 10 minutes. If you're not at the hospital, I'm going to come and get you, because you've got to go to the hospital. And I've known this doctor for a long time. I said, I'm going to go to the hospital. So I go to the hospital. I was there for like 7 hours. I had intravenous drip antibiotics. They had to cut my throat open. They had to take all this ick out of my throat. They had to, tape it shut. And then I had this, I was on Bactrim and K-Flex together. My digestive system, I was eating a quart of yogurt a day, just in smoothies. However, that was my main part of my meals for like 5 days, because my digestive system was toast. And then after they cut my throat open, I hate to say it like that, but that's what happened. And then it went in my eyes, and I got pink eye in my eyes. And so then I had to get antibiotic drops in my eyes. So it was like, this is all very complicated. I know this sounds like a comedy show, but everything I'm saying is true.
You know what, Selena, I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to put everybody up here because I want to look at their faces. Everyone who sees me, you heard what she just said about the ball and the lump under her throat. You understand what just happened to her? From the COVID, so much cellular debris she went through the COVID, that her system didn't even have the least amount of reaction to fight for itself. So she had her submental, submandibular lymph nodes went like this. She became toxic. Remember where the eye drains? Where does the eye drain? It drains out this way and then down. Yeah, so it's really that the whole picture of what she said made perfect autoimmune sense to me. And that's why we're saying, and why she's recommending us hear this whole story, because she had a couple infections. The first one was life-threatening. Then they get her home. Now she has this one, and that's life-threatening. And then they clear up that one, and now she's got this one, and she can only be on how many antibiotics while her stomach is being torn apart between all the antibiotics. So I didn't mean to jump in there, Selena, but that one was really important. So do you mind if they ask you some questions, Selena?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so I think I actually saw, okay, there's a couple already here. Does John sell the pulse oxes to individuals? I'd like to know. I'm going to really need a good quality device. So John, that's one question fielded to you.
No, but I can, when I get to work on Monday, I can find out who some of our distributors are. We actually buy directly from the factories and sell to the distributors. So we don't really see any of the product ourselves.
So if you want to jot your name down in the chat thing, your email, so that they
Sure.
can stay in contact with you too. But hey, everybody, you can lift up your microphones, and we're going to shoot Selena some questions here that you've had about COVID.
I think, let me see, Kathy was asking about PROMI. It's not PROMI, it's proning. And I think it really is just a way to pose the body so that the lungs like get off of your rib cage on your back. They want your lungs to hang a little bit, and they want you to walk so that that circulation is taking place. They want you to stretch your arms over your head and have your hips higher than your head, so that there's like that dimension where they're just trying to jazz with the physical orientation of the lungs to just help them recover from the moisture that's in them. So I see that you wanted to know how do you spell the exercises? Promi. It's actually proning.
So, Selena, it sounds like when you say that, it really sounds like you were doing almost like a yoga pose. I'm seeing you do the cat pose where you're down.
Yeah, very much yoga kind of poses, it seemed to me.
Because
You
that would
know.
open up the lung cage if you were in that position.
Yep. What?
It would open up the lungs if you're in that position. I did read a little bit about proning when they found that COVID patients recovered better in their lungs, respiratory system, if they were in the prone position rather than supine.
Mm-hmm.
They obviously had you doing those poses on the bed.
Yeah.
And the doctor was quite impressed that you were able to do it too. I remember you telling me that.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I have to say something, Elisa. When I was a kid, up in Pennsylvania, I would always, every winter, I would come down with croup really, really bad. And ever since I was a little baby, the doctors always told my parents never to let me sleep on my back, always make me sleep on my stomach because of the way that the mucus and stuff can actually slide down and deep into the lungs easier when you're on your back as opposed to on your stomach.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, John, they were ahead of their time.
Yep.
They were proning you since birth.
Yep. Well, the other thing that I'm wondering is, I just taught the circulatory system a couple weeks ago. We were talking about that. And one of the things that I just thought about with the whole oxygen levels is one of the important ingredients in your body being able to hold on to oxygen is magnesium. And most of the world is magnesium deficient, which is probably why they said to use the Epsom salts bath. But Epsom salts doesn't pull as much magnesium as magnesium chloride does. So, you know, that may be a way of, you know, increasing blood oxygen as well.
Now, can magnesium chloride be taken orally?
No.
How do
Magnesium,
you raise your
magnesium
level of that?
it's very difficult because the last place that magnesium levels disappear in the body is in the bloodstream. So they actually have to do tissue samples in order to tell. But if you use the magnesium oil, you can tell by putting it on your skin, because if it stings, it means you're magnesium deficient.
Oh.
Mm.
Selena, John is he's a botanist and he's also an anatomy physiology teacher. So he's very, very adept at using the essential oils medicinally. What ones you can take orally and which ones you can only put on the skin. But yeah, he's been on the front lines of that for almost 35 years.
A little
Great.
while.
Yeah, I just thought when she was telling me that too, John, when she was telling me about the oxygen, when she fell asleep with the oxygen on, how all her aches and pains went away, and why her poor massage therapist was working uphill with no oxygen going through her.
Yeah.
Any therapist would probably want to get out a hammer and a chisel and say, what's going on here? And here it was.
Well, the problem about taking magnesium in orally is if you take too much in orally, it's like taking vitamin C. Your body really doesn't absorb it. It just flushes it out, and it actually gives you the runs really, really bad, which then leads into other problems. So magnesium is best absorbed through the skin.
For the immune system, though, the one oil that we found that is good was, what was it? The black seed oil. Black seed cumin oil.
Yeah.
That's what the doctors down there in Florida had found out. Do you want to tell them about it?
Yeah, black seed oil is really, really good for stimulating the immune system. Astragalus root oil or astragalus root powder is really good too. It's considered a deep immune system booster. It actually allows your body to produce more lymphocytes in the blood marrow. So you get a stronger immune system from that. So they're both very good oil. They're both very good herbs.
Dracula's seed oil. How do you
Yeah,
say it?
black seed oil.
Oh, flaxseed oil. Okay.
Black seed, not flaxseed.
Black. BLA.
BLACK.
Do you mind repeating the second item that you said, the second type of oil?